There we go. And Gary, I'll make sure that you can share your screen should you want to pop some slides on.
Definitely, yes.
Marvelous, thank you. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much. Oh, there's Gary. I was wondering. Right, there you go. Fantastic. Well, excellent. Dawn's welcome to you. What's brilliant, fantastic. Just my little job, just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, keep you up to date with what we're trying to do, what we are doing. So the public Facebook presence for us, that has ground to a halt at the moment because I set it up as a page, and what we really need is a group. I need to get to setting it up as a group because the page is just not going to do what we want it to do. What I want to be able to do is to enable you guys to get your presence up there when you're commenting and responding. The page doesn't allow that. So bear with me on that one. That's the first thing. Leads coming through to the affiliate network. It's gone very, very quiet. There is no doubt about it. Adrian and we've slightly changed the system of putting referrals through. So any referrals and leads that he gets will be going directly from him and suggesting a tying up with a potential client. So that's the way that's going to work from now on. But I think both him and I have gone quite quiet on potential work coming through. But I've put a few things in place for a couple of people recently. But what I'm expecting to happen between now and Christmas is that I'm likely to get more inquiries about people that want to be trained as house healers, because I'm starting another tranche of publicity, interviews and things like this. So I've passed somebody across to Dawn recently that may or may not, take up a training program. What I would actually love is if anybody, let's call them more senior house healers, more experienced house healers, if anybody actually wants to talk to me about being available to run a house healing training course, I would love to talk to you about it. I only need another person. Dawn's going to get overpowered soon. I mean, you're going to get over full soon, basically, Dawn, is what I'm saying. So I need another option for somebody else, for potential trainees to be trained by somebody else, because I'm not going to be running another course for another year, and I don't want to be talking about this great work that we all do and then just having to say, sorry guys, you have to wait a year. So anybody wants to talk about that, Melanie, I'd like to talk to you about it if you're interested in that as a concept. So drop me a line. That's one of the things. Right, one of the things I said that I would do back in the summer was that I would create a little training package about YouTube videos and how to present yourself on video and all of that sort of stuff. You'll notice that I haven't done that yet, but what I've decided I'm going to do is anybody that's interested in that, and there were a number of you that were, if I'll publicize this on the Facebook page, but what I'll do is I'm going to run a free Zoom process, right? So we'll have a meeting and I'll just do it as a Q&A. I'll load up what I think is important and we can run it as a Q&A, and then it can be there for anybody in the future that actually wants it, that drops in and wants to know more about video and all of that stuff. But basically, this is your opportunity to specifically pick my brains about video production, how to make yourselves look reasonable, the basics of getting up on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I'm opting at the moment for the afternoon, about 3ish, but I'm open to a bit of flexibility on the time of Thursday, November the 9th, as a possible workshop, brainstorming, whatever you want to call it, about video production. Completely free, obviously. Just let me know if you can make it, and I'll publicize it a bit. And Dawn, maybe you can help me kind of be a bit organized about getting that together. That'd be brilliant. The only other point I wanted to make before Gary comes on is next month we're gonna next month is our Q&A, so it's our opportunity for us all to share our successes, our wins, the issues that we might be facing, whether that be with the business or with the clients. Any of that stuff, that general open forum Q&A. Again, Dawn will probably send round a little email and maybe try and encourage you to just give us some questions before we have that session. I'm not sure which date that is, but it's 8th. It's the 8th of November, so it's the day before the video workshop. We're going to have Adrian with us at that event, and he suggested that partly because of the slowness of leads coming through at the moment, that he would like to talk to you all about lead generation, basically finding leads, finding the potential clients, how to go about having those conversations that actually encourage those leads to click into business in a loving and professional way that's suitable for what we do. It's not about selling. I mean, let's face it, Adrian is a salesman, but equally, he's an extremely good well-being practitioner. So he's going to be with us, and he'll talk through some of his little tricks and nuances, and undoubtedly, I will try and shed some light on whatever it is that I do that seems to encourage people. And again, hopefully Dawn hopefully will be with us on that occasion. I will be there as backup because I think you're on vacation. Is that right, Dawn?
I'm in Arizona. I'm not sure about the Wi-Fi, so hopefully I will be there. But if you're a backup to pick up the recording of it, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so stuff continues to happen, and again, Rosie is gently tinkering away at the website presence. There's some general developments happening, but slowly. But it's okay. It's all coming together, whatever together is. Okay, so that's my homework. No, it's not. That's my admin and housekeeping done. So, Dawn, shall I introduce our wonderful guest?
I would love that, Tim.
Okay.
And Gary, I've just heard some amazing things about you, so I am so excited to listen to your wisdom. Thanks, Tim.
Well, Gary, there's nothing like a big build-up. So I hope. Thank you for coming along, Gary. Basically, Gary. Many of you know Gary from his videos on YouTube and his exchanges on Facebook. And I first came across Gary because, like a lot of you, he sent me an email years ago. He dropped me an email saying, broadly speaking, as far as I remember, it was something like, I'm finding all these lines everywhere. I started dowsing again. I don't really understand what the heck's going on. What I do is I write a lot of books, and I still don't really understand why the scary stuff sells, but it does. And oh, by the way, I was trained in magic. Like what you do, Tim. Keep it up. And it was that was broadly the email. I don't know whether you would remember that, Gary.
Yeah.
I think I wrote back saying, sort of with this some sort of suggestion that what would be lovely would be to try and kind of raise your vibe. I didn't say this, but this is what the subtext was. Raise your vibration a little bit. Get away from that scary stuff. Get away from that paranormal stuff. I know it makes money, but have a look at these energy lines because they're amazing. They're fascinating. And by the way, did you know you were a Knights Templar? That sort of thing. But I don't think I was as on the nose as that. And fundamentally, Gary and I had an exchange after that. We chatted a few times on YouTube, and we've shared a number of experiences. And what I love about Gary, and I'm sure this is what you love about his work as well, is he's a really genuine guy, and his work is authentic. And what we do as you watch his videos is you're going along on his journey with him. And that journey is a journey of discovery of his connection to the earth, his connection to his heart. And really that is being done through earth energy and through that exploration. And I think it's a wonderful experience. So I'm really pleased, Gary, that you're with us. And without any more nonsense rambling from me, over to you.
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me. If I seem a bit quiet, I've just had my eldest son with me for the last 10 days. So I've burnt the candle a bit at both ends, and he just left yesterday evening. He's en route to New York and Austin, and I won't see him for another year. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take you through some slides and tell you a bit of a story. I can't tell you it in great detail because it would take a long time. So I will probably shoot through some of these slides, and obviously if there's any questions, happy to answer them. And if you want to reach out to me afterwards as well for anything, please feel free. I do need to share my screen. Can I do that?
You should be able to. Perfect.
Is that it? You see it?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so I live in the Czech Republic. I actually live in a part of the Czech Republic called Moravia, and the weird web will become readily apparent. Actually, the journey I'm on started one evening when I took the dog for a walk and bumped into some character that I've never met again to my knowledge, that was engaged in some weird shamanic type thing on underneath the castle here in Brno. And these are just pictures of some of the patterns he was leaving in full public view. I think I was probably the only one that really noticed. But I began to somehow interact with this particular shaman. How, I don't really know, but I would take stones and add my stones or energize stones in the sunlight where he did, and he would move them in. And so what sort of began was like some kind of interaction between us, although I'm never really sure what the purpose of that interaction was. But I'm going to come back to this guy because he was the one that really sort of triggered everything. He got me interested in shamanism. He got me interested in the Slavic deities and the Slavic pantheon of gods and the Slavic culture in general. And I started going out to visit some of the archaeological sites, and there's quite a lot of them around here. And I was particularly interested in this Greater Moravia, which existed around 800 to 1100. And for some reason, and I can't even remember why, I picked up a dowsing rod. Actually, I picked up a coat hanger and bent it and cut it into a rod or a couple of rods and started dowsing underneath the castle Spielberg here in Brno. And I started to pick up these lines. And I think this is probably about the time I wrote to Tim, to be honest, because I was a bit bemused by all of this. And being a PhD scientist, I did try to take a slightly rigorous approach. And, you know, what are these? Why are they there? And why on earth do they seem to run through castles and churches and that kind of thing? So I started measuring them, and I realized that the ones I was finding were quite not very wide, maybe 5, 6, 7 paces wide. Some were a little wider than that, 12 to 15. And I started mapping these things using this Dowsing Mapper app that you can get on Android, etc., across the city of Brno. So you can imagine me walking along with 2 bent rods, through the streets of a Czech town, people looking at me like, what on earth is wrong with him? But I started to have these scenarios where I found myself following a line to places that somehow had some significance in my past. I arrived here in 2006, and these lines seemed to take me to places that I had been to in 2006, 2007, or had some kind of significance to my life. Got to move the next slide. Oops, maybe we jumped one there. Maybe we jumped several. Let's check. Yeah. Oops. Sorry about this. There seems to be some lag. Let's go backwards. And I started, because I was going to all these Slavic sites and dowsing there, I started to also puzzle, how come is it that at a place like Mikulčice, which is an archaeological site, you can see a picture of one of the churches there exposed, how come is it that every single church, and there are 10 or 12 in this small area, is actually positioned on at least one line? The line would run down the aisle. Sometimes there would be a crossing line, And in the largest church on this site, there was multiple lines crossed just sort of in front of where the altar might be. And then there was a couple of what's called rotunda churches, and these are sort of circular churches, as you probably know, and they would have an inner structure, and you can see the inner structure there. And so what I would do is I would go in and start dowsing, and I'd discover that there was some kind of vortex inside this structure, and the structure of the vortex mimicked the internal structure of the architecture. And I think, Tim, this was one of the things we talked about earlier. I could not figure out how on earth this could possibly be. The PhD scientist in me kind of, rejected the idea that this could even be a thing. I also am a magician and studied with the Servants of the Light for 5 years and then supervised their students as well. So I've got 20 odd years experience as a magician. So I'm also open to the spiritual side of things. And I'm also quite psychic. So I was aware of the energies, and I was aware that there was an atmosphere of in these archaeological remains that was very pleasant, very conducive to prayer and meditation. And so, this was me. I'm wandering around all over the place. And at this particular location was one day when I found another rotunda church, and I decided that since it was well off the beaten track, I'd do some meditation inside the vortex. And I was meditating. I suddenly had this vision of this old bearded guy. And I said to him, "Oh, who are you?" And he started to try to tell me his name. And I'm like, "I'm sorry, you're going to have to try again. I can't quite get that. What?" And of course, what he was saying was Slavic or Czech words, which was Volk, Vzduk. And Volk is wolf and Vzduk is breath. So he's telling me that his name was Wolf's Breath. And I'm not sure what the connection between him and the shaman that I met in the first place is, but there is some connection. Also have to credit another character that I met along the way that we both know, which is Rory Duff, because he started to coach me as a fellow geologist, and he's even more scientific than I am, and much more rigorous in trying to sort out the science of all this. And there was a couple of things he told me that I initially sort of reacted against. He said to me, "I see that you're mapping sort of these lines, some of these smaller lines, as bending." He said, "I think you'll find the straight. What you're doing is you're walking in on one line and you're walking out on another." I'm like, "Nah, it's not possible. I know that's not true." But I am open to criticism. So I took a friend who subsequently learned he could dowse and discovered that Rory was quite correct. I wasn't picking up the line all the way through the church. I was getting to the point of the vortex and then following the other line out. And so all of the time this is going on, I'm learning and my dowsing is getting better. I dropped the 2 rods. I just dowse with 1 rod. And I'm still running through all these lines in Brno and going to all these churches. And along the way, I start to notice that everywhere I go, there are feathers, birds' feathers. I park the car, I get out, I'm in a line, there's feathers in the gutter as I get out. There's feathers dropping from the sky in front of me. There are butterflies, even in January and February, there are butterflies all the time, fluttering around me, landing on me. I have a couple of experiences as well where there are people that are somehow there one minute and just gone the next, and I call them liminal people. So with these lines, I'm having all these weird experiences which are sort of pseudo-paranormal. I'm having all these weird experiences about having my life reflected back at me. And I'm having sort of continual interactions with the shaman because, for example, I'm following one line through the city of Brno, and I come to the end of this sort of, we call it a 10-foot in Hull. It's like a back alley where you park your cars, and it's 10 foot wide, which is why we call it 10 foot. And there are 3 bollards at the end of it. And you can see the bollard, one of the bollards there. To my utter amazement, I've never been there before. I see these 3 bollards and they're dressed, 2 as women and 1 as a guy. And I go up and I start examining these things. And sure enough, there's the telltale signs of the shaman, the little bits of tobacco, the quartz pebbles. And so once again, somehow I've bumped into this shaman and his activities following these lines in Brno. Anyway, Rory said to me one day, he says, "Listen," he says, I think I picked up a really major line in the Czech Republic. If you feel like it and you have half a chance, would you go and take a look?" So I said, yes. And this was around COVID time, so I had to wait until the lockdown eased a bit. I jumped in the car and I drove 121 kilometers. Took me a couple of 3 hours. And I got out there and there's a church and I dowsed this line. It's 25 paces wide. And I'm like, my God, so huge. I've never seen a line this big. So I text Rory and I said, yeah, I found it. He says, how big is it? I said, 25-ish sort of paces. Nah, mate, we're looking for something much bigger than that. Like, much bigger? So I'm searching all over the village. I decide to follow this 25-yard line from the church. And in the middle of the street, in the middle of nowhere, I find this line that is literally 92 paces long. And I literally walked backwards and forwards, checking, double checking, making sure it wasn't multiple lines together. It was one line. And then I texted Rory and he says, yeah, that's the one. And this was my introduction to what he calls type 4 lines. And once I'd discovered a type 4 line, this was what captured my interest. And that was what took me into this Templar line experience. So one day I decide, along with my then girlfriend, who had seen a program on Czech television, all in Czech, about the Templars in the Czech Republic, to go to this church, which is now a museum in a place called Jindřichův Hradec. I have a horrible time saying it, so I'm going to call it JH from now on for simplicity. And we decided we'd go and take a look at this church because it has some very interesting artwork on the walls from the 13th, 14th century that's supposed to hide the secret of where the Templar treasure is hidden in the Czech Republic. So we go out to this church, we arrive, we park outside it. I get my rod out, I'm walking along, and the first thing I discover is a 90 pace wide line, and then I discover its pair, and then I discover another one, and I realize that what we're looking at is a major vortex on multiple type 4 and other lines through this John the Baptist church in JH. And as I say, now it's part of the City Museum, it's no longer a church. But then we discovered that there was another vortex on the Templar line in JH, which is the Assumption of the Virgin Mary Church. And then driving back to Brno, we discovered two more, the Basilica in a place called Třebič, and another site just outside of a place called Telč. Subsequently discovered many, many more vortices. And so we were able then to get an azimuth, and we were able to define the line, call it the Templar line, because many of the points that it goes through and vortexes at have some relationship either to the Templars or the Teutonic Knights or to a family that lived in JH called the Lords of Hradec. And so it was the Lords of Hradec that brought the Templars and the Teutonics to this part of the world. So it's all linked together. And since I had now defined this line, my sort of idea was I want to map this thing from one end of Czech Republic to the other. And that's quite an extraordinary task. The two lines that make it up, there's a negative line, which we christened Merkosh, which is the Czech or the Slavic goddess, earth goddess, if you want. And we called the positive line Perun, which is the sky god, the guy that uses lightning as his weapon. So let's look at John the Baptist Church because it's really interesting. Its Templar origins are not official, but it's got Templar signage all over it. It's got Templar architecture. It's definitely got Teutonic Knights, and the Teutonic Knights seem to take over from the Templars in this part of the world quite naturally. There's also a relationship between the Lords of Hradec, the local Templar guy, the local Teutonic guy, and the church was built originally for the Templars, then given to the Teutonic Knights, and then given to the Minorites. And when it was given to the Minorite to be turned into a monastery, the Lord of Hradec granted the Templars and the Teutonics another location, which is the other vortex in JH, and that's where they built the Mary Church. So the two Templar line vortices in JH both have this sort of shared origin. And as I said, it has all this weird artwork on the walls, and I really wanted to look at that. But if you see the church, it's there in the picture. It's actually been built over a period of time. And the bit that is interesting is well, it's all interesting, but the earliest bit is the bit that's not white, but sort of a yellowish colour. And you'll notice that the two parts of the church are actually slightly offset. They're on a different angle. And that white bit that sticks up the tower, that looks awfully like some kind of Middle Eastern prayer tower. So it's all a very strange sort of church. And when you get in there and you look at this artwork, it really is very bizarre. First of all, you see plenty of evidence for Templar type crosses and Teutonic type crosses. The next thing is you see all this sort of floral stuff, which reminds me of sort of living and dying, the sort of Steiner idea of living and dying, birth and death and rebirth and all that kind of thing. And then you see all these square type arrangements which have very strange designs in, and every now and then they have a grotesque image. And what we noticed was that there was one grotesque image with a fat guy, laid down, and he's holding 4 fingers up, something like this. So we thought, well, maybe there's 4 of something. And then we noticed that there's 4 other grotesque images, and there's one character, let's see if I've got it, yeah, there he is. There's one character up in the archway there, which is over the vortex, that actually is laying on his back, is naked, except he's wearing some kind of headgear like a turban. And of course, the jewel in the turban is positioned over his third eye. He's got one hand at his mouth as if he's saying, shh, something like that. And his other finger's pointing to this square with a pattern in it. And actually, I puzzled over that pattern for quite some time. And I suddenly thought to myself, wow, that looks like a cymatic sound pattern. A cymatic sound pattern is something that you can make on a flat surface with sand, and then you run a bow at a certain frequency and the sand forms a pattern. And so it would be perfectly feasible for the Templars in the 11th, 12th, 13th century to be able to experiment with different sound frequencies and the patterns that it made in sand. And could this be a sound pattern? And so if it is a sound pattern, what does it look like? Well, it actually looks like the frequency, the solfeggio frequency for 852 hertz, which, if you're familiar with sound frequencies and solfeggio frequencies, is said to equate with the third eye chakra. So I thought to myself, well, this is interesting. I wonder what would happen if I sat in the church by the vortex on the temple alignment and played 852 hertz. And I did that with a sound generator. Fortunately, it's a museum, not a church, and there's hardly anybody there usually. And literally, it blew me away, because what it did was it took what was a really electric atmosphere anyway from the vortex, and it was like plugging that through a row of amplifiers, like at a Status Quo concert in the 1970s, and it literally blows your head off. So I'm thinking, wow, this is interesting. What else can we discover? And what we discovered was another grotesque image with another allusion to a chakra, this time the throat, I believe, and 741 hertz through a cymatic sound image. And I played that one, and that gives a really interesting sort of spiritual, prayerful vibe rather than a power thing. And I've played these 2 frequencies now at multiple vortices on the Templar line, and they all give the same sort of result. I think there are 2 more to decipher, because the guy was saying there's 4. The problem is if you remember the image, let's see if I can go back, that everything's way up in these arches around the windows, and it's really difficult to see exactly what is up there without step ladders. And I haven't asked for the step ladders yet, but I did go back there this weekend with my son, last weekend, and took some very detailed pictures, and I'm hoping I may be able to decipher some more of these tiles and see what they say. So I wonder, did the Templars not only know how to build a structure around the vortex to utilize it for meditational purposes, but did they also know how to use frequencies to supplement that experience? That's what my theory is. So sort of only taking a bit of a diversion around the church and the sound frequencies and stuff, let's get back to this web of weird idea, because it's very important. What I find is that these lines seem to have this personal connection. You follow them to places that have meaning. They either have meaning to you from a past perspective or a present perspective, or they have meaning in the sense that they take you to places that speak to you spiritually. So there's a very personal aspect to it. You have all these. I have all these liminal experiences, feathers and liminal people, and all this kind of thing, and they take you on a journey of exploration of the land around you. So you connect with the land in a very sort of shamanic way, to be honest, and it has a very strong and meaningful sort of impact on your personality, as I told Tim in a recent podcast. I mean, it's changed me as a person, as a human being. And I'd read this book a long time ago, in which this young man who's with the Christian Church in early England, or one of the kingdoms in England, is off to study a shaman's techniques in a neighbouring pagan kingdom in the northeast of England, and he actually gets exposed to the weird web. And so I call this set of all these energy lines now the web of weird. And I'm going to skip this because I kind of talked about it. So I want to talk also a little bit about the lines themselves. They're always made up of pairs. So any type 4, any type 2, 3, 1 alignment, using Rory's terminology, always seems to have 2 lines associated with it. They're always polar opposites. I call one negative or female and the other one male or positive. And here I'm talking about Perun and Mokosh, but this is equally applicable to any of these lines. Isn't it weird that the positive or male line always seems to follow the high ground? It likes oak trees, which is Perun's tree. If it passes through a church, which it often does, almost 99.9% recurring, the church is dedicated to a male saint. It often passes through burial grounds and cemeteries. If it's going to go through other buildings, it's going to be places of administration like castles, chateaus, town halls, libraries, that kind of thing. Whereas its opposite line, which I call the negative line, seems to follow the valleys. It's always associated with natural springs, lakes, water, wells, fountains, that kind of thing. The churches that it passes through are almost always dedicated to a female saint, or to the Holy Trinity or the Holy Ghost. So that's where that breaks down, but it's always the female line that's that goes through the churches dedicated to a Holy Ghost or the Holy Trinity. It's always associated with crosses. Could be a roadside cross, could be a significant location. There's one on the main motorway between Brno and Prague called Devět křížů, 9 crosses. It's a historical place where there are actually 9 crosses positioned on the side of the road. The female line goes through Devět křížů. If it's going to go through buildings or places, it's usually parks for kids, playgrounds, offices, schools, hospitals, which is a very sort of feminine energy type thing. And this is almost invariably correct, this relationship. So what is going on? Why is a church dedicated to, say, St. George on a male line? Why is a church dedicated to St. Mary on a female line? It's kind of weird, but it's part of that mystery, and it's part of that connection and the web of weird. I also discovered that I can communicate with the lines and talk to them using the rod. So I can stand there and say, well, actually the way I discovered this was I'd be looking for a line that I thought, using an azimuth, would cross a road at a particular point or somewhere within a certain vicinity. I'd walk up and down, couldn't find it. So then I'd scratch my head, get in my car and drive up the road slowly, trying to find it. I do drive in Dows, I must say. And eventually I would park the car, all annoyed that I couldn't find this line. Where did it go? I'd get out the car, maybe to look at the map, and then I'd realize I'd parked my car in the line. So it's almost as if I knew where the line was subconsciously all the time, only consciously I didn't. So at that point, I started to do things like, hang on a minute, then, okay, Rod, where is the Templar line? And the line it'll swing and point in direction. So I'll say, okay, and is that less than 50 meters, more than 50 meters, less than half a kilometer, less than a kilometer? And the rod will tell me where the line is, and almost 99.99% it's correct. I can say, it told me it's going to be within half a kilometre and 450 metres along, I'll find the line. I can ask where its midpoint is. I can ask what direction it's travelling in. I can ask if it's male or female. So I've developed this sort of rapport with the lines. So the energy is intelligent. It's intimately connected to me. It's intimately connected to us as humanity. And I think in the past, as demonstrated by the Slavs and their churches, they knew how to utilize this energy for the right purposes. And it connects us to the planet and it connects us to environment. These vortices become places of real energetic and spiritual significance. And I even begin to wonder if some of these vortices are actually portals to other dimensions, because if you start to add in the sound frequencies, the shamanic chanting, this certainly starts to accentuate the power. And I've had an experience, I put it in one of my videos, where I literally thought I was gone. I thought I was flying. I had to grab onto something to stop myself. And in that moment, I just felt everything was one thing. And I could hear everybody talking and thinking. It was just the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life. So, I've been spending all my time tracking this alignment from one side of the Czech Republic to the other. The problem is that as I continued dowsing, I opened myself up to all these other more subtle type 4 lines. So I've discovered that it's not just the Templar alignment, but this area seems to have maybe 12 type 4 lines that all sort of ribbon travel in a certain alignment, crossing and weaving in and out of each other. So it's a very energetic place. And that means that I kind of got distracted. Tim said to me, he says, why do you follow the lines? Isn't it enough that they're just there and you find the vortices and work with the vortices? And as I said to him, for someone like me, it's important to know where the lines go and to be able to differentiate between the different lines, because the places that they go through tells you something about yourself, tells you something about the planet, tells you something about humanity, and has spiritual significance. So for me, I have to follow these lines, and this is probably going to be my life's work, to be honest. I can't help myself. I've got to do it. So just a couple of other places that I've discovered on the Templar line. I mentioned Třebíč Basilica. Třebíč is a town, and it has this very prominent basilica, which originally was a chapel in a monastery back in 10 something, and it was part of a monastery, and then it was converted into this basilica and dedicated to Saint Procopius. It has 14th century patterns on its walls as well. It also has these very interesting angel windows, which I began to associate with Templar as well, as has Rory Duff, by the way. And it's got Templar and Teutonic crosses painted on the wall. There's no official linkage in terms of the history. The problem with the Czech Republic, unlike the UK, is that A, the Slavs didn't write much down. In fact, they didn't write anything down. And B, the communists destroyed it all anyway. So it's very difficult to really drive into the history, not like the UK, where you can get some very accurate history. Here it's quite difficult. So here's some of the artwork on the wall. You can see again, it starts to look like vortices and floral stuff. Very interesting. And then Telch. Telch is a town that was managed by the Lords of Hradec. It had a Templar connection. The tower that you can see in the photograph, that's called the Templar Tower. and I fully expected to find a vortex in Telch. I didn't. I found it just outside of Telch on this hill, the top photograph, and there's a 17th century church there. The funny thing is, though, is that the hill, it looks like it has archaeology. I can't find any reference to archaeology, but there's an ancient spring there, and there's a stone arrangement that looks very much like a Paleolithic type stone arrangement. So I think that the vortex is actually a very ancient place that was picked out by the clergy to build this church to a Czech saint in the 17th century. Finally, because I tried to compress this quite a lot because of time, there's also, as you all probably know, a distinct connection between dragons and serpents and earth energies, and that's very prevalent here too. I took a friend of mine to a place called Wryd, where there's a big basilica that's a place of Marian pilgrimage, and also has relevance to the two saints that founded the church in this part of the world. And I told him that I'd been dowsing there, and 4 small lines ran through the church, and there were 4 vortices within the church, and that was what was giving the energy that was attracting all these people for natural healing. And he's a bit of a cynic, and doesn't really believe, and he can't douse, and the rods do nothing for him. And so we're strolling down the side of the church, and I'm telling him, well, there's a connection between these earth energy lines and dragons. And we look up, and at the end of the church, where the 2 of the vortices would be, that I'd been telling him about when we're inside the church, the drainage is exiting the church, and on the end of the drainage are 2 dragon heads. And I said, see? So everywhere there's dragons mentioned, there's earth energies in this country. And as you know, the largest lines above type 4 are also known as dragon lines. But the interesting thing is that in the Czech mythology, they have the tree of the world. And in the branches of the tree is Perun, the sky god. And down in the roots is the god of the underworld, Veles. And Veles and Perun fight each other throughout the year. So it's sort of an annual, it's a reference to the annual solar cycle, I guess. Veles comes up and steals Perun's wife, cattle, kids, or whatever, and then Veles throws his lightning bolts at him and gradually defeats him, and then the whole cycle starts all over again. But in the Czech Republic, you'll see many pictographs like this one, where this relationship between Perun and Veles is shown as Perun on horseback spearing Veles, the serpent dragon. So it's very much like the Michael or George and the Dragon story. It's just the Slavic version. So I'm not going to go on much longer because I know I'm limited on time. But for me, this is a journey. It's a journey not just sort of geographically discovering parts of the Czech Republic, even within a few kilometers of where I live that I've never been to before, taken there by the lines and shown some of the most beautiful energetic places I've ever been to. But it's about a journey within myself. It's about a journey, spiritual journey, a journey into all kinds of mystery and intrigue, the weird web spun by the weird sisters. And I think it's the one thing that connects everybody together. And it's a journey that I thank God, if there is, the powers that be, that I started this journey. And as I think I've told Tim a couple of times, I imagine that one day I'll be dowsing in the forest, meet the goddess, and never come back again. At least that's my hope. If you are interested in some of the stuff I've talked about, and I've tried to compress it, so there's an awful lot that I've missed out. I have written some books that don't sell at all, not my paranormal stuff. But there's a trilogy chasing series which kind of outlines the start of the journey, the shaman, and some of the places. And then just recently, I've written this book called Dowsing the Weird Webb in Moravia, which is an attempt at being a little bit scientific, but asking the question, why these lines there? What do they mean to us? And sort of describing them within the context of the journey that I've just described to you, but in more detail. and talking about how important these lines are and how important it is that humanity remembers its humanity, remembers its connection to the planet, remembers its spirituality, and gets back in tune with these lines, because these lines connect us all. They connect our past, our future, present, other dimensions. They are the framework upon which reality is based, in my opinion. It's like being a computer programmer and building a framework of lines on which to program everything. To me, the web of Wryd is the framework of reality. How did I do for time? Not too bad.
You did wonderful for time, Gary. Thank you for that inspiring talk. And, you know, as I was listening and just as you're closing there, it really made me think about the relationship with sound as well, because as somebody who works with sound frequencies, and I love the fact that you found frequencies in that church. And I'm curious as to whether you've made any connections to Rosalind Chapel and the cubes.
Yeah, it's something I've looked at a little bit, but to be honest, I'm so busy with all the stuff over here. Rory Duff, to mention him one more time, he posted a comment on my Facebook page, my Dowsing Facebook page, and said, you know, you better be careful posting all this stuff. You're going to have crowds of dowsers coming across on vacation because it's all pristine stuff. Nobody's necessarily, you know, done this stuff before here. So I've got so much going on here that I'm only peripherally taking interest in that stuff. But yeah, I am aware of that connection there. But to be honest, I don't know much about it. To me, it seems that the Templars were onto something. They were guardians of the way, but I think they were guardians of these energy lines and these alignments. And I think they sited their big cathedrals on important vortices. I think they designed architecture that was sacred architecture and accentuated that energy. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they used chanting and sound frequencies to work with those energies as well.
Agreed, absolutely. I think it's irrefutable. Questions? Who's got questions for Gary?
Yeah.
Adam.
Hi, Gary. Yeah, I really appreciate what you've been saying, because I can certainly confirm with what you've been saying. Because where I live in a town called Warwick, it's got the Warwick Castle, and there's a famous Templar's Cross, which is a convergence of actual 7 dragon lines type 4 energy lines. And they crossed at this point by Warwick Castle, which is the called the Templars Field, which happened to be the first possession of the Templars in the UK, apparently, and it connects all the way through to the temple, which is a temple in Templars Temple in London, and in this particular field, the oak trees are aligned in a Templar cross, so they're all aligned with 3 different crossings of these oak trees at this particular field. And when I first started getting into it, I spoke to this lady who she thought I was actually Freemason, because she started talking openly to me, even though I'm not Freemason, but I was portraying that information. And she even said at this point in Warwick, the Templars Cross, and I didn't know where that was at the time, there's this subterranean, what they call a crystal palace, where these energy lines cross, and that was used as a sacred space for these energies, so they can do all the rituals and whatever they need to do. And these Templars were used as a guardian of these particular dragon lines, and that's something definitely
interesting. Yeah,
you've been saying there. And yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised to find something similar at that church in JH, to be honest. When the problem with the Czech Republic is the communist era wiped out a lot of historical context. So even though you talk to the people in the museum, they know very little. In fact, they didn't even know there was a Templar connection until I said, well, look, I've been doing some research and I can tell you that there is a Templar connection through the Lords of Raditz. And then they sort of agreed with me. But there is apparently some character who knows that church really well. And I've got his name somewhere. And I've been told to try and contact him and get a tour from him, because he knows some secrets about the church. And there is a set of stairs. You might have saw them in the photograph. There's a set of stairs descending below where the vortex is into the crypt, and it's got an iron grill over the top of it. But I often wonder what's down there, because the vortex is absolutely underneath that arch. And if you stand there, it's just incredible. The energy is like static electricity. You can feel it. And you can tell that other people feel it too, even if they don't know what it is they're feeling, because I've sat there for quite a long time meditating and just watching the odd person come in. And when they walk through that area, you can see this, they react. There's something energetic there that they're sensing, even though they don't know what it is, and they react to it. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I've had some own personal experience. Even this morning, I was out for a walk along one of the Templar lines, and I decided to change direction where I was walking because there was a lot of rain, so it was all muddy. Walked down this particular alignment, saw this particular chap, all wearing a navy blue, navy cap, and I don't know why I was looking at him. I don't know why I was attracted to that particular person walking there and then. So I looked where he was going. He was walking over to the field where there are the other ley lines running through. So I watched him walk over there and didn't think much of it. And literally, I walked around the corner to where the houses were. About 5 minutes later, I saw the same guy coming out of his house, following the path that he just actually walked along. It was an absolutely phenomenal experience as well. And I thought, hang on, I saw that particular guy because he was wearing all navy blue
Yeah.
talking on his phone, unless it was his twin brother or something like that, which I doubt very likely. It was like me, time glitch.
Liminal people. That's I didn't really go into that, but I was dowsing a line in Brno, and there was an old lady. She looked like she was in her 80s, and she was sat in a very strange position. She was sat on somebody's back side garden wall, which was a wall so high and then wooden fence, and she had all these plastic bags, shopping bags, like Tesco and what have you, full of trash all around her. And she had a hand under the wall and she was fiddling around. And I thought to myself, she's maybe homeless, poor lady, And I was just dowsing this line, walking up the hill, not 20 meters away. And I went up the hill and I came back down to check again where the line was. And I look across and she wasn't there. Neither were the bags. And so I stopped dowsing. I started running around the area looking for how can an 80-year-old woman with about 16 plastic Tesco bags full of trash just disappear? And the number of times this has happened to me, I call them liminal people. And they're always like that. They're not, they look homeless, they look out of place, like a Santa Claus type guy, big guy with a big white beard and hair. And I'm thinking, oh, look, Santa Claus, ha ha. Then I turn around, he's gone, and I'm like, oh no, not again. Liminal people. And my friend, my late friend Sue Vincent, she and her partner, they go to a lot of magic circles, a lot of stone circles in the UK, and they used to do shamanic stuff. And she said on several occasions there would be some character that would show up and kind of interact or observe, and then the next time they look, gone completely just the same way, almost as if you were meeting the sort of spiritual caretaker of the place who was there to see what you were doing, So I think that when you get exposed to these energies, your ability to see beyond just this reality is probably accentuated too. So occasionally you see these people. But I mean, I've had just amazing experiences like sitting there meditating at a vortex. Actually, I was filming myself talking about sitting there meditating at a vortex for a video. And unfortunately, I was doing my iPhone and I had it, filming me. And this feather just fell from the sky, just like this, in front of me. And I was so shocked. You can actually see the shock on my face. And I'm fiddling around trying to get the camera to point the other way so you could see this feather. There was no birds. There was no wind. There was nothing above me. And I'm just like, okay, that's it. You know, this is a sign, you know, and this happens all the time, strange things happening. And I just take it as like a sign that I'm on the right track, doing the right thing, you know.
Amazing. Thanks, Adam. Melanie, you've been waiting patient with your hand up.
I'll take it down now. Hello, Gary. Thank you very much. It's fascinating. I read The Way of Weird back in the early 80s when it first
Yeah.
came out, Dr. Brian Bates' book.
Yes.
And in fact, it's been a long time since I read it. It's a brilliant book.
Yeah.
Wasn't he a wolf as well in the book? And you've got
Yes.
the shame wolf's breath,
Yeah.
which is how you would create sound. I
Yes.
just think amazing synchronicities in what you're saying.
Oh yeah. And I think it's still working itself out and playing itself out. I also bumped into a Slavic shaman in the US on the internet, and she suggested that Vuk Vzduk may in fact be me, but we'll see.
That's very true. I used to be a conservation ranger in Kent before I moved to Ireland, where I live now. And we looked after an Augustinian abbey, 11th century. It was actually founded by a Knights Templar. And we used to have the most incredible strange things happen there all the time. And music, especially, any kind of music, if we had a concert, used to send the whole place completely haywire. And like you, I've studied magic. I used to work with Dolores and Tony Willis.
Yeah.
Years. And the first place I ever chose to do my magic was in a little woods in another part of that woods, which was called Templar's Mount. It was like,
Nice.
it's really, really strange. I know what you mean about these things cropping up every so often. And it's really magical. So I find your stuff fascinating. Thank you so much for your talk today.
Well, it's sort of like life becomes almost like a spiritual adventure, almost like, you know, like some of the books I used to read when I was a kid, where, you know, the kid's laying sick and there's a picture on his wall and he goes into the picture and has an adventure. And sometimes I think, my God, you know, I'm having that kind of an adventure all by myself, you know, without anybody's assistance or help. And it's really bizarre, but it's a lot of fun.
Long may it continue. Thank you.
Hi, Gary. My name is Melinda Cropsey, and thank you so much for, I don't know how to raise my, I don't know how to put that little yellow, so I'm doing it in person.
I see it.
But thank you, tremendously inspiring to hear your talk. And I was wondering if you've ever, I too have been called to certain sort of bizarre, remote places in the world from time to time, and had some very similar experiences, especially in Portugal and more recently in Corsica, the island in the Mediterranean. And I wonder about the whole concept of an Earth Guardian. I feel like when you talk about your connection to the Czech Republic and the work you've been doing there, I almost get this sense that, you know, that it's at some level, some of us are called to really appreciate these places in this unique and extraordinary way, and enliven them to some extent, and perhaps inspire others to do the same through our determined. And I feel I would love to at some point talk to you about some of the experiences I've had in other places. But
interesting you say that, because just recently I found, well, I was on a dowsing trip following the Templar line, and I was really disappointed that the Templar line didn't go where I thought it would. I thought it was going to go to this place called Svarti Hosting, which is a major Marian site pilgrimage on a hilltop. I'd been there many times before. There's a huge vortex there with multiple lines passing through it. I'd had an amazing experience there. And to my utter amazement, the line just doesn't go there. It just turns around and starts going in a different direction. And I was so disappointed, because it was taking me through some just kind of mundane forest, and again, I made a video, and you can see I'm disappointed and downhearted, and just, I say at the end of my little intro where I'm downhearted, and I'm just about to go look at a cross, and it turns out it wasn't a cross. It was a little chapel in the middle of the forest, and it was on the female line of the Templar line. And to my utter amazement, it was dedicated to the Lady of Hostine. So there was a Hostine connection that I'd mentioned. My disappointment that it didn't go through Hostine. No, it went through this little chapel dedicated to the Lady of Hostine. And the male line went through a bunch of sort of garbage gardens about 50 meters down the hill. So I followed the line all day, and then the next day I went back because I felt compelled to go back, because I kept thinking to myself, maybe I'd found a vortex in the middle of somebody's backyard, not very far away. And I thought to myself, I wonder if the vortex should actually be at this little temple place, chapel. So I went to the chapel and I sat on the steps where I thought the vortex might like to be. And I just said, management, should the vortex actually be here? And my rod said yes. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. So then I said, so should I try to move it then? And it said yes. So I said, do I have your permission to try to move the vortex? And it said yes. So I stood there and I meditated for quite some time. And then I simply imagined that the male line just moved 50 meters up the hill and joined the female line where I stood and formed a vortex. And after about 10 minutes, I quit, and I sort of went down the hill, had a cup of coffee at my car from my flask, and then I went back up with my rods. And to my utter amazement, I knew straight away, because there were butterflies everywhere around this little chapel. And I knew the vortex was now there, and I had to adjust my map to show the vortex being there. And I realized that I'd repaired what Rory Duff calls repairing a node for the first time. And it made me, in that book, the last book that I just written, I kind of finished with this. It made me think, with my background in magic and wanting to be a magician, it made me think I'd become an earth magician, and my magic wand is my dowsing rod. So that was a real experience, and it's not something I do lightly. And I was at another location just a couple of weeks ago where I felt the vortex should be, and I asked, should the vortex be here? And the stick said yes, and I said, and should I try to move it? And it said no, so I didn't.
Yeah.
Gary, in your opinion, what makes a vortex shift?
I have to think that it's lack of attention, lack of conscious attention. I think that in this instance, the little chapel probably wasn't used as much as it once was, and the line had just slid down the hill into somebody's backyard, and I gave it some attention, and I think that now it will get more attention, because I think the atmosphere is positive for attention, but I think it's got to do with human interaction. I haven't found many places where I felt like the vortex had moved, but this other place is called Pustemierge, and there are like 10 lines all coming in. They all come in from all over, and they come very close together, all within a couple of 100 meters. And there is one vortex on the side of the hill where one line crosses, but the other lines all just come very tight, packed, parallel, and then they all spread out again the other side of Pustemierge. And where I think they would have probably come together, there is a Slavic era rotunda, and it is the largest structure of its kind in Europe. It would have held over 100 people. It was part of a major monastery administrative center by a place called Zelena Hora, which was a big Slavic place of power. And so this place had true significance in the 800s, 900s, 1000 era. But now it's just a small village with a bloody good pub, though.
I am conscious of time, and we're at 8:08, I think. Oh, sorry, that's my time. So that'll be 4:08 your time. Any other questions before we close our wonderful network meeting?
Nope. Well, it was my pleasure to talk to you. I hope it was interesting, and yeah, if you want to find out a bit more, I have a YouTube channel, and I do kind of post videos on my progress and findings periodically. Not as much as I used to because it's a lot of work, but I do.
Amazing. Nick, did you have your hand up then? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hi, Gary. Just a very quick question. Are you following the line now? You following it east or are you following it west?
I am following it east. I have to go back west though because I've got a small gap that I need to fill west of JH. But I'm following it east. But I tell you what I'm doing is also I'm trying to fill in detail. So if I've gone from road to road or road to footpath to road and I've got a point, sometimes I'm driving back along the line and structuring a nice 20-kilometer hike that will take me across where the line should be multiple times, so I can add more detail to the path. And you know, I'm kind of a geologist, and geologists like to map things, so I can't help myself. Sorry.
No. Well done. Brilliant. Thanks.
Cheers.
Well, thank goodness that people do map these things, because then it gives us things to find as well and to test our dowsing with. So thank you for all of that. Amazing talk. Oh, Rosemary.
May I ask one question? Can you hear me? Hey, Gary, when you had your map up, I live in Germany in southeast Nuremberg. So I live between like Regensburg. I live in Hartmannshof, between Regensburg and Nuremberg. So kind of where your map ends on the west side is where I begin. And I have such a passion for all of this and everything you say. And even just as like enjoyment in my life as a hobby, this is what I love to do. And so I was wondering, how do you get started? Like, do I just douse where a good starting point should be, and then questions upon
these is where
intensity levels?
Just pick an archaeological site or a church, an old church that appeals to you, and start there, and you'll probably find something and then follow it. That's my advice. Or just ask the rod to lead you to what you should find. It's kind of like random. What's that program?
Randonautica. I've had some crazy adventures doing that.
Energy line following. But I would
when
pick
you
an
classify
archaeological
your
site.
lines, and how do you get the but how do you get the information out to the public, or to us, or to people interested when you're calculating the lines or the color or the frequency or the thickness or the depth? Do you have like a protocol sort of that you
There's a little
follow,
book
or are you just listening to information and guided? And
there's a little book by Wryd in which he sets out a classification scheme, and so I just use his classification, because you know we need to settle on a single language. In fact, in my book that I just put out, this one, I kind of repeat some of it, because we all use language. We talk about things like alignments and ley lines and so on, and we actually mean different things, and it gets confusing. So I actually do a very simplistic. You know, to me, a ley line is the straight line that you can draw through the vortices of an alignment, right? That forms the alignment, and the alignment. So you've got these male and female lines, and they're doing this. Where they cross usually forms a straight line. That's the ley line, and the alignment is the width of the sinuosity, and then you have a male and female line. So I kind of define my terminology in the beginning of that book, but it's based on Rory Duff's, because Rory Duff took a very scientific approach to it and did a lot of work. And I don't see the need to repeat all of that, especially since it's obvious that he was, it's correct, essentially. And as Tim says, Tim said to me in a podcast we did recently, you guys are looking at lines that, are very, very small. There is no yet, our classification scheme hasn't gone down that far yet. We're just classifying the big ones. So there's still some work to be done, but we need to agree on a common lexicon, because otherwise we all start getting confused. Yeah. What we're talking about.
It's all coming together, isn't it? I mean, it's all happening, and it's all coming together in the time that it needs to. So it's brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we better draw it to a close, if that's all right. Dawn, back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Gary, again. Just inspiring. Hopefully it inspires us all to get out with our rods and to investigate our landscape around us. And thank you all for joining us. We are back together again next month, and it is our Q&A, and would love for you to submit questions that we can answer at the Q&A. We want to make it focused on your needs. And then the other thing that I'll be posting are the dates for next year. We have those set. And also a little poll about topics that interest you, so that we can try and reach out and align speakers that meet your needs and desires. So that is our plan moving forwards. Oh, excuse me. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. The recording will be up later if you want to review it.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah.
Cheers.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.